What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Rams Brothers. I'm your host, Dean, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and the other great host of this show, Nick. And Nick, got some rookies signing contracts, got some potential schedule leaks on deck for you guys. But first and most importantly, how are you, my good brother?
I'm good after Dean and I's sabbatical, which is the right word because we didn't get paid. We've taken time to figure out myself, but I've been great. I'm ready to talk Rams.
That's always most important. Mental health is always a priority here at Rams Brothers, especially when you find out that Benny Sko has been traded. And this is about all the time that we're gonna spend on Benny Sko. A 2026 pick swap. Benny Sko traded to the Texans. Nick, I hope you're okay. A 6th and 7th rounder were swapped in 2026. Maybe it's not you that was heartbroken. Maybe it was me that we're losing Benny Sko. But a lot of Rams draft picks and undrafted free agents are going to potentially fill the void in Jordan Whittington, in Drake Stoops, right? So some talent that they brought into the building that's going to replace that pretty quickly. So I hope you're okay. Let's just start off the episode making sure that you're okay with the Benny Sko departure.
Well, that's really what the sabbatical was about. It was the Benny Sko news. I had to take. We had episodes planned. And I was like, no, I can't. I can't do a full episode dedicated to that. It makes the captain Skoranek thing last year, the fact that he was elected a captain, even more baffling. That he just gets traded away. You'd think that this would be someone that they prioritize, but I mean, yeah, we moved up in the draft next year and we got rid of Ben Skoranek. Great, cool,
right? Yeah, it's not even next year; it's 2026.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I mean, final year of the rookie deal. Rams like to do the pick swap. Happened with Van Jefferson. Happened with Cam Akers. So yeah, it happens. And some other Rams news: 7 of the 10 rookies have signed their rookie deals. So I think the Braden Fisk news is most interesting. We'll go through all the rookies that signed their deals in just a couple of quick minutes. But what's really interesting: Jared Verse, Cameron Kinchins, and Brennan Jackson have yet to sign their rookie deals, but it's all expected by the end of this week. But what I really like is that they signed Braden Fisk first, because I feel like it's a strong FU to the internet personalities who used all their algorithms and all their analytics to determine that the Rams overpaid for a player that they want to pair with a player like Jared Verse. They haven't spent on defense in the past, right? In terms of the draft, you wanted to be able to value that draft pick as much as possible in Jared Verse and build a committee of pass rushers, which Tony Pastors has alluded to. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, it's all obviously about really important topics. And the way that they're restructuring the front seven with new defensive coordinator Chris Shula is definitely going to be something to watch. But according to Aaron Wilson, Braden Fisk, as he agreed to his rookie contract, comes with 3 years fully guaranteed. And also an added bonus, he's getting 15% of his salary guaranteed in the 4th year, which it's not the case typically with 39th overall picks. Jonathan Mingo last year with the Panthers didn't happen with him. But what Steve Avila happened with him last year, they used a similar structure because he signed his rookie contract as a second round pick, and they got 3 years fully guaranteed and 10% of the guaranteed money coming in the 4th year. So Fisk got even larger percentage despite being 3 picks later than Steve Avila. But I do think it was a signal to the internet personalities, to everybody that was saying that the Rams paid way, way too much to trade up for Braden Fisk, when in reality, you want to be able to pair those two together, bring their personalities to light, and let their production on field shine through. Because I feel like what was happening is they're watching all this Jared Verse tape, and this other guy in Braden Fisk as a 3-tech, which was arguably the higher position of need after you lose Aaron Donald. It all kind of comes together within the draft evaluation. And all the situations that they laid out, it made sense to pair those two guys together. And I think Rams fans were really happy with how they prioritized the defensive line. So yeah. I think that was a pretty solid starting point for the Rams.
And, as noted by Aaron Wilson, it sets a strong precedent in the draft contract market because it's a lot of guaranteed money, like you said, for a 2nd round pick.
Yeah.
But it's the 1-2 punch. It's the chemistry. It's all that you got with them in college, bringing that to the NFL level together. And I mean, it's exciting. And what they did with Steve Avila was great. And it's something that all Rams fans can get behind and agree was the right move. So hopefully this is more of that.
Yeah, I think in finding Rams, right, players that fit the mold that you want to bring into the culture, that represent the city well, that represent the organization well, there's a couple of others. Blake Corum, Tyler Davis, They all signed their rookie deals. Jordan Whittington, who I feel like is going to be the Benny Sco replacement, look for him to be a captain in future years on special teams because of what they could do out of the backfield, what they could do on special teams, returning kicks, returning punts, line him up in a big slot, line him up in the backfield. He'll be a fun player to watch, keep your eyes on. Bo Limmer, Gentle Joshua signed his rookie deal, Nick. So Joshua Cardi is officially in Horns. Hopefully we found our kicker of the future. All 6'2", 208 of them. And then KT Leviston also. So depth for the offensive line. So we talked a ton about the draft class. Don't want to spend any more time with the draft class moving forward.
Let me just spend one more second with the draft class. Speaking of Gentle Joshua, just real quick. Every Sunday I'm watching playoffs, NFL, or NBA, NHL. And then, the UFL is on. And I'm rocking a XFL shirt of the LA Wildcats. It seems like every week, somebody is drilling a game-winning 51, 61-yard field goal. It happened again this week, and I just don't understand why they can't. Like, I want them bring in some XFL kickers too. It's the last time I say it, I promise. But bring in some XFL kickers to stand behind Gentle Joshua. I don't know what his benchmarks and how much he's going to be training, but I just don't want the kicking situation to be as abysmal as it was last year when you have people on television making 51, 61-yard kicks on week in and week out.
I totally get it. Jake Bates, come into Los Angeles. We welcome you with open arms. And I feel like there's a couple of players on the St. Louis Battlehawks as well, maybe even the kicker there that they could bring in for some competition. But the 2023 schedule and the 2024 schedule, I wanted to just kind of go back and forth a little bit because 2024 schedule is going to be released this Wednesday night at 8 p.m. So they'll do a big show. It's the social media teams, all their departments like Super Bowl. They're going to put out all these crazy videos. The Chargers have done anime in the past. The Rams have done all these different things to kind of bring it to life. But the 2023 schedule was interesting because they were coming off of a 5-12 season, in 2022. And the schedule maker said, let's make it as tough as possible for the Rams coming out of the 5-12 season in an extremely impossible situation to succeed again in 2023. They traveled the fourth most miles. They had 4 opponents, which was league leading. It was them and the 49ers. There are only 2 teams that had to deal with this. It was the Steelers, who was a loss. The Cowboys, also a loss. 2 teams that they had to play before the bye. And I think 2 of 3 weeks in a row. The Ravens was a loss in overtime after the Week 10 bye. And then they got the Commanders. So they were 1-3 in 4 games with teams having 2 weeks to prep for them. They had 3 early kickoffs. The Colts, they won that game 29-23 in overtime. I believe that was week 4. It got them back to 2-2. And then they got dismantled by the Cowboys, where Stafford tore his UCL and his thumb by slamming into DeMarcus Lawrence's helmet. They lost that game 43-20. And everybody thought that the season was over at that point. And especially the next week when they had to play the Green Bay Packers and Brett Rippon was under center. I mean, it was one of the worst games I've ever watched as a Rams fan. It took you all the way back to the 2011, 2012 Steve Spagnuolo, Scott Linehan days. Like, it was just pathetic football. And you were highly, highly concerned going into the bye what this team was going to look like post week 10. So that game was terrifying. And then we talked about the Stafford game where he was upright, and then they decided to run the Philly special and hurt his thumb even more. He had 1 piece of tape on his thumb after he tore the UCL in his thumb after smashing it on DeMarcus Lawrence's helmet. And then he slammed the ball again into the ground, which probably injured it even more. So that game was a little bit.
Cut the lead to like 26 or something like that. like which should be noted right here. It's like you did not need to run the Philly special right there.
Yeah. I mean, they had only 2 primetime games too in 2023. So they had 5 the year prior. If you remember back to 2022, where they went 2-3 in the 2 wins in 2022 came against the Raiders, which I believe was Baker Mayfield and Benny Sco down the sideline, or Van Jefferson, who won that game. And then it was the Broncos on Christmas, where I think they put up 51 points. Yeah. And Cam Akers went off. I think he had 3 touchdowns in that game.
Does Christmas count as a prime time?
Yeah, it did. Yep.
I guess so. When you have like 3 Christmas games, they all kind of I guess that was the primetime game, but still.
Yeah. So they said, okay, 5 was too many in 2022 coming off of the Super Bowl. In 2023, let's give them just 2. So the Bengals, was that week 3? Because they went Seattle, 49ers, and then the Bengals in week 3. They lost that game 19-16. And then Thursday night football against the Saints, where they won 30-22, where they were coming off of 4 days rest and had to play Thursday night football in SoFi Stadium. So the Thursday night football game, it was late in the year. They had to play the Commanders. You remember back on, I think it was the 17th of December. And then 4 days later, which was a lot of how Matthew Stafford's locked in was catered. They were spending time in the war room with Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, trying to figure out how the hell are we going to be able to put together a game plan in just 4 days, having to go against a must-win situation against a team that has a really strong front, has a veteran quarterback, has some really solid skill players, great catchers out of the backfield, all these things that they had to prepare for. And you know what they did? They turned around and won the game 30-22. So I was pretty impressed with the way that they were able to prepare for that game. But it felt like it was very, very much unfair, because even though they had the luxury of being at home against the Commanders and the Saints, 10 days later, they had to go fly cross country to go play the Giants at MetLife and Wink Martindale, who just wanted to send the house at Matthew Stafford at a higher frequency than any other team in the league. So it was like all this crap thrown at you all at once, and you had to figure out a way to navigate through it. And I think that's what made the Rams so special coming out of that Week 10 bye. And we talked about it in our last episode, getting Matthew Stafford in the pistol, all the short motions, the heightened success rate with the duo scheme, being able to really trust the offensive line and run your game plan behind Kyron Williams, who was healthy down the stretch, thank the Lord. But then we brought in Blake Corum, and 2024, I feel like is going to be a much better feel in terms of offensive line productivity, rushing success rate, the duo scheme, increasing the usage there. So all that stuff is to come. But finishing the season 10-7 felt like a pipe dream when you go back to Week 9, because they were 3-6 going into the bye.
I think it was a pipe dream going into the year, truthfully, because they were dealt such a terrible hand with that schedule. Apparently, they lobbied big time not to have that Green Bay game in Green Bay, and then it ended up being in Green Bay, and Demoff was pissed. And then just, all the travel and the short windows. And I think their win total last year was like 6.5. And they shot, and the fact that they were even in the playoffs, almost taking a win in Detroit, came really, really close to doing that. So it just leads you to believe that, the schedule's tough. If you look at our opponents, it's definitely not an easy schedule. But if they're not dealt such a crappy hand, they should be on par or, better than they were last year.
Compared to the last couple of years, it feels like it's lightened up a little bit. So this year, 2024, second place schedule after finishing second in the division behind San Francisco. They'll face the 12th hardest schedule in the league, with their opponents combining a 146-143 record this past season. So a little bit above 500, tied with the Niners. The Niners have the exact same strength of schedule, despite finishing in first place, which it's hard to make sense of. But you look at the home versus away opponents, it's going to be pretty interesting. So home, 49ers, Cardinals, Seahawks, Packers, Vikings, Eagles, Bills, Dolphins, Raiders. So you lobbied for Packers at home this year, and you got it. You don't have to travel to Lambeau Field. The Vikings at home, who knows what kind of game that's going to be with J.J. McCarthy under center. The Bills losing Stephon Diggs, kind of losing some of their identity. The Dolphins, which is going to be a really fun game. You got Jalen Ramsey and Odell Beckham Jr. partnered back up again. And then the Raiders, who we always seem to have their number. So I think the home schedule, you actually have an extra home game this year with a 17-game season, 9 compared to 8. So I'm happy over that, right? It's like tiny wins you got to be able to get at this point in the year to hopefully be able to see through to a 10-11 win season. So I think their over-under win total right now is at 8.5 or 9. So
is there, just looking at the opponents, I know how they'd like to keep it where you always kind of end the season with divisional games, and it's the last 2 weeks are always kind of divisional based. Who is your pie in the sky? I want this matchup to be this date, because Lions on Thanksgiving in Detroit is what I wanted a Rams Thanksgiving game forever, and that would just be so cool.
I was kind of thinking that, right? Because I would love pie in the sky, Miami Dolphins, right? Because then you get Jalen Ramsey, Odell Beckham Jr. as a primetime game. You get them reunited in Miami. You get Mike McDaniel and Sean McVay, a long-standing relationship that goes all the way back to Washington. Miami was actually the team that was reportedly most interested in bringing in Chris Shula after they moved away from Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator, but they opted in to bring Anthony Weaver from Baltimore. I would say the Lions, if you can get the Lions on Thanksgiving, which would be like, it's the Lions Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford's so familiar playing on Thanksgiving with the Lions. It would be in Lions Stadium again. So it would be an away game. So you go back to Detroit. Matthew Stafford's back in Detroit on Thanksgiving. Both teams are projected to have a pretty decent record this year, could finish top of the NFC. I think that game would be amazing. And then give me the Niners again. I want the Niners in primetime because I would love to see a little Jimmy G back in San Francisco. Maybe it's week 18 again and the Rams have to clinch a playoff spot and maybe you get Jimmy G versus Brock Purdy in the final week of the season. I would absolutely love that instead of Carson Wentz ripping up the 49ers' secondary. Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua and Demarcus Robinson did such a great job in the final week of the season. And now he's paired with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, back with Andy Reid. So that should be interesting. But those would be my big three.
You have to think like Patriots, Rams in Foxborough. Like that's like all the as a Rams fan, that's going to be one of the games that you don't want to see as a primetime game. But the Patriots are going to be like they're not probably going to have one of the least amounts of primetime games. So that's my bet as like Thursday night in Foxborough. Like that's like their big primetime game is against us because I feel like they're just going to be so bad. Or the Jets.
They could be
or the Jets in New Jersey, I think could be a big one that with Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford, like the two old guys going at it. I think that is something that the NFL will probably want to like make a big storyline. Both these guys got one Super Bowl in a different division, or they started in a different division.
I think that's a great call, right? Because, Rob Saleh going against Sean McVay's offense, which was always a good matchup going back to San Francisco. But then Rodgers versus Stafford, a lot of comparisons are made, right? With winning one Super Bowl, just the arm talent, the ability to throw off platform, the ability to throw at different arm angles, like the ability to manipulate in the pocket. Those are, they're very similar kind of players. I think that's the
sneak
outlier. That's the sneaky one, which I think would be extraordinarily fun. Maybe even throw that one on a Thursday night football game. Hopefully not too late in the season, but maybe a little earlier on in the season if it's going to be in New Jersey so that they don't have to travel across country late in December or January. That would be great. I would love that.
I mean, I would love it if it's like, second week of this or like towards the end in December while I'm home in New Jersey. Because I would totally go to that game. 100%.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. They face 6 teams on their schedule for 2024 that made the playoffs. So the Vikings, the Raiders, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, the Bears, the Saints, the Pats, the Jets all missed the playoffs. But playoff teams that they played this year, 49ers, Packers, Bills, Dolphins, Lions, Eagles. Yeah. So hope is you split with those teams. Hopefully you come out with a 4-2 record. And then the remainder of you have a winning record against those other teams. Teams like the Bears, I'm hearing rumors that the Bears and Rams could be scheduled for week 1. So that game would be really interesting. But you have the Saints' number. The Pats no longer have Bill Belichick. It's Jared Mayo. The Cardinals, you've swept them in consecutive seasons, 2-3 years in a row at this point. The Raiders, we have their number. Kevin O'Connell with Minnesota. There's a lot of opportunity to win games this season, especially if everybody stays healthy.
Definitely week 1 against the Bears is ideally where to get them. It's Caleb's first start in the NFL. They could definitely start the season 1-5 and then end, on a 6-game run.
I think if that game was in Los Angeles. And it's going to be in Chicago, unfortunately. But if that game were in Los Angeles, you could bring Caleb Williams back home week 1 against the Rams in LA. That to me would make a ton of sense. But the fact that it's not there, a little bit of concern in terms of.
I feel like week 1 will be I guess it won't be Seattle. I mean, this is probably why I'm saying it. But last year it was Seattle. I feel like we start the season with Seattle a lot.
Well, I would take them again and get another 30-13 win. And, get our legs underneath of us. That would be good. They set the expectation last year. I harped on that game for 9 straight weeks throughout the first 9 weeks of the season before the bye. I'm like, they showed it to us. We know that they could be physical. We know that they could run the ball. We know that if Matthew Stafford's healthy, their pass attack, Puka Nacua, and all these skill players, they're going to be a talented bunch, and they're going to be a tough out in the end of the season. And that's what I hung my hat on. But the rumors that are flying around right now could be Bears-Rams week 1. I've been seeing a lot of that. I know we talked about how it could potentially not be, but, it would be a really fun way to start the season. Rome Odunze. We talked about it season.
Last time the Rams started the season against the Bears, they won the Super Bowl. So
that's a good point. So let's run that back 100%.
That leads me to think that they're not going to do that, because that isn't such recent memory that it's just like, I don't know.
So much changes from 3 years ago. It's like I think there's still 4 or 5 players from the team now that are still in the roster from the 2021 year. It's like Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, Rob Havenstein, and the rest of that list is Tutu Atwell. Who else?
Yeah.
So the Bears week 1 is one potential rumor, and then something that I read was really interesting, that sources were flying around about the Rams versus the Eagles in week 6, because sources are leaking that Fox wants to have the Eagles and the Rams during the same week as Penn State and USC, because Fox owns the rights to the Big Ten. So that could potentially be something of interest, right? Because you get USC, Penn State on Saturday, and then you get Rams Eagles on Sunday.
That's so annoying, because then all of the Penn State people can fly out and just go to both games, and it's just like a perfect October in California for them, and watch both of their teams. Like I already know friends in my life that are flying in that week for that Penn State game.
Of course,
and it'll 100% turn over into, well, we'll go to the Eagles game now too, because of course.
You know what? The way that they collapsed last year, what were they, 10-1 to start the season, and then they finished 11-6, 11-5.
Yeah,
and then they lost in the wild card round to Baker Mayfield's Bucks. I'll take the Eagles. I don't care when we're playing them this year. I want to play them, and I want to beat them in our stadium. I mean, that's the way that
everybody in the NFC South owes every single player on the Eagles a big hug and a lot of respect, because that Baker winning that game gave Tampa so much false hope with him. I think, no disrespect to Baker Mayfield, he's a Rams legend, as we know, but I just don't see him as the true answer there. I mean, that division is just always in the pits, but it definitely buys Tampa a couple more years of just treading water.
Totally. And they just signed a safety, it's Antoine Winfield Jr. to a massive contract. They're paying players internally. They're paying their stars. So I mean, they're trying to hold it together for a couple of more years and at least be, a decent product on field, which they may be. And then the Rams and Lions is the only other schedule leak that I potentially have on Thanksgiving, just because I feel like that one makes a lot of sense. Potentially too, now that Jared Goff signed a massive contract extension. 4 years, 170 million guaranteed. The Rams gave him 110 million guaranteed 4 or 5 years ago. He's now up to $280 million in guaranteed money, specifically handed over by Brad Holmes. So by the time Matthew Stafford signs his extension, which we expect to happen at the end of this week, you could talk about guaranteed money versus guaranteed money. Stafford going back into Detroit, Stafford's old Super Bowl and Thanksgiving, all the rematch of the wild card round, which was probably the best wild card game on the slate last year. So that all those things could happen. So I think those are I've got 3 primetime predictions and then 3 schedule leaks for you guys. So
yeah, Goff hasn't won on Thanksgiving.
There you go.
He's been there 3 years. He does not have a recorded win on Thanksgiving. He has not. Even
more reason to sign us up for that game. If you guys are enjoying the pod, we're probably going to come back, record another episode. I would say probably Thursday, with the schedule release being Wednesday. Probably we'll be back this week at some point. If you guys are enjoying the pod, make sure that you like and subscribe. We love you guys, and go Rams.
We didn't say like and subscribe until now, huh? We totally blew it.
Yeah. We're working on the kinks. And I talked about the last episode. We're gonna do some new stuff. I promise.
I don't know how much longer we can work on the kinks. We've been doing this for 4 years now.
Hey, it's a labor of love. We have jobs.
Labor of love.
We do it on our free time. We
Yeah,
do
this
it
is-
for you guys. Yeah.
That's true.
Hopefully you guys enjoy. We'll talk to you guys again soon. Go Rams. Peace.
Go Rams.